Hello and welcome to the Trust and Influence in B2B podcast. I'm your host, Joel Harrison, and welcome. Very good that you could join us today. In this podcast, we talk about all matters relating to, as the title suggests, trust in B2B marketing. And it's a multi-dimensional, multifaceted challenge, which is evolving all the time, and my understanding is evolving all the time. And today, we're going to explore a slightly different topic or theme that we've done potentially recently, which is on the issues relating to trust in digital advertising, which has come to something of a crisis in recent times. And my guest today is Dan Shaw of Funnel Fuel, who's got an unrivaled experience in the digital media world, having spent many years at IDG and then running agency Encore Digital Media, and consequently being integrally involved in the seismic shift which have reverberated across the sector in that time. Dan has worked with some of the world's biggest B2B publishers, brands, and agencies, and he is uniquely positioned to be instrumental in defining a transformational moment. Dan, welcome.
Thank you, Joel. Quite the intro. Looking forward to this.
No pressure.
No pressure at all.
Okay, so let's start by talking about Funnel Fuel. So Funnel Fuel was established to address a very specific problem, which I've kind of teased out there in the intro, and that's around the efficiency and, more importantly, perhaps the integrity of B2B digital advertising. Tell us a little bit more about the problem, what's going wrong, how it's affecting brands, agencies, and buyers.
So I think this is a really interesting question. I think B2B advertising in particular is under the spotlight at the moment. There's been a few examples of B2B advertising campaigns not doing what they should be doing. A lot of conversation around brand safety, inappropriate positioning of B2B ads against content that doesn't even fall into the category of dubious. It's just outright inappropriate. We've all read those kind of articles, and if people haven't, I'm sure you'll be able to point them in the right direction. I think where we've ended up within the overall advertising sector is it's just been driven by a lot of opacity, and it's not improving. So if we look at what's happening in the consumer world, Google's announcement recently, Meta and Mr. Zuckerberg was very explicit around moving forward, you don't get to see anything. You give us budget, you give us creatives, and you walk away and we do the rest for you. It's becoming more opaque. In addition to that, you've got a B2B advertising community that traditionally hasn't been able to use the tools that do the best job for B2C marketers. So you've got huge innovation happening in B2B advertising, huge innovation happening in advertising. What's really happening is it's huge innovation in B2C advertising. The B2B advertising community continues to get left behind because there isn't enough innovation focused on this niche market, which is a pretty big niche market when you're looking at just under 10% of the total advertising spent globally. But again, there hasn't been investment in both developing the right products or having the right conversations with B2B advertisers. So the position we ended up in is one where people are using consumer built tech, trying to strong arm a B2B objective into that, and it just doesn't.
So it's a big problem there. Like you say, 10% is a big facet of that, and it's a very important set of communities that you're driving. I guess one of the questions I'm going to ask next is what's gotten to us to this point. And one of the things I suppose is that the people building that technology haven't been motivated or incentivized. They haven't just been focused on that B2B audience because they're looking for the mass market consumer audience. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, Joel, I'll be honest, I think the whole advertising community hasn't actually been engaged with a lot of the development that's been happening to enhance the product that they are buying. So you speak to consumer marketers, and I remember, crikey, I think it must have been almost a decade ago, viewability suddenly became a subject. People were being charged for ads that were appearing on websites but never even got seen by a human. There was uproar, there was the release of new tech to address this issue. I personally felt that was quite an exciting moment. It was addressing a problem I'd witnessed firsthand from being on the publisher side, the incentive to create more and more ad slots, which you could monetize those ad slots, where advertisers were blissfully unaware there was zero impact on that ad because it had never been seen. And do you know what ended up happening, Joel? The viewability standard was defined without real input from advertisers. And it was defined as half an ad being in view for 1 second. So we kind of recognize the problem. We don't speak to the advertising community because I can guarantee you there's nobody who would define that as being good viewable. And then we set a metric which, again, doesn't do justice to the requirements of any marketer, let alone a B2B marketer. So I think that's a problem across the whole sector. And I think the advertising community is neglected. I think the ad tech world has built itself without engaging that community at all. Then you recognize that we operate in this niche, this sub 10%. Nobody's speaking to us about what's happening. And there's a limit to what we can do. But the positive thing is we can make changes. This isn't kind of a lost cause. And I'm not issuing a rallying cry for a B2B equivalent of Google or another dominant platform, because I think LinkedIn has already kind of stolen a march on the B2B kind of marketing world. And you look at some of the spend flowing through that one platform, and already we're starting to see a dominance, which worries me, because I think the ecosystem will work better when it collaborates, powering the hands of one or two, as we seem to do time and time again.
So there's a lot going on here. And thank you. It's a very complex problem to explain. So thank you. But you've done a great job of simplifying it there. It feels like there's a problem that people perhaps consuming these services, whether that's the ultimate buyer or the intermediary, the advertiser. Sometimes is complexity part of this? Is it just too complex to understand? So people or is that a legitimate excuse that you could use in this situation? Should people have got over that?
I do think people tend to, we don't defer to ignorance is bliss. Do people really want to know about this? And to be honest, Joel, there's still a sector of people who kind of like, it kind of works enough. I don't want to ask the awkward questions. I think the truth is, and where we see the changes happening in B2B I don't think anybody needs to reinvent this ecosystem. I'm not suggesting we need to kind of rip out the plumbing and completely build from scratch. And I think that's kind of where I view companies like Funnel Fuel as being able to add real good value into this B2B community, because we're not trying to rebuild the core plumbing. That plumbing does a great job of being able to push relevant advertising message in front of relevant audience at scale in real time. That's really exciting. We can use that plumbing. We just need to build specific bits on top of that consumer plumbing to make B2B advertising work better. One of the things that excites me about your current message is around this whole idea of integrity, transparency. Part of the problem is nobody actually asks the ultimate questions. And I think it's not difficult. How are you actually targeting this audience? Where is my ad being served? And what will it do for me as a marketer in terms of supporting my marketing objectives? We should be able to answer those three questions very easily.
Yeah, because the kind of ultimate implication of this is that it's inefficiency, right? Is there's you're not getting advertising budgets, marketing budgets are under pressure as never before. And if your advertising isn't being served efficiently to the right people, then you're not getting anything like the right results from it. And that's a massive issue, right?
You've hit the nail on the head there, Joel. And I think, again, if we think about, I hate to keep referencing the B2C world, but we should learn from that world, because the B2B advertising marketing world is very, very different. It's the reason you've been doing this for decades, Joel. There's a specific need for specific information, support, and help. So I think the two bits there, and scale is a really interesting one, and efficiency, because the B2C world sacrifices efficiency, accuracy in the interest of scale. Almost everybody could be in market for a lot of these FMCG goods. Wastage, inefficiency, slightly less of an issue. You're operating at such a large playing field that 10, 20% wastage is perfectly acceptable. Well, that 10, 20% becomes 50, 60% for B2B marketers, especially if they're trying to do the things that are not designed by the B2C ad tech world. So account-based marketing is just a really simple example. If you're just trying to find a small subset of 500 organizations that are a key part of your middle funnel ABM activity, you cannot accept wastage that means you're actually targeting 6, 7, 8, 9,000 companies. You've got to make sure the advertising is hitting those 500. Prove it, and then prove the impact of it. If we can do that, then everybody wins. And it's not snake oil and it's not magic. It's just proving that you're doing the job that you're being paid to do.
The interesting thing about this for me, Dan, is that I've spent the last 20 years kind of defending B2B marketing, aspiring to better for B2B marketing, but also defending it from its denigrators, saying, "Oh, it's behind B2C. They don't understand. It's not sophisticated." This is an example where it really is behind. It really is not sophisticated. It really isn't as efficient, and it really needs to be changed. So this is a topic I'm really kind of happy to kind of get behind.
Good. Good. And also, I think, Joel, I do agree with you, but I think there's another part, which is we are lucky. We don't, as a community, have to continue to do the thing that we are told to do by Mr. Zuckerberg or by the guys at Google, because actually a lot of our B2B audience is findable and is more engaged outside of those environments. So we don't need to throw money at Meta and just hope and pray it does something, because it will not do the job for a B2B marketer.
So Dan, let's take a bit of a step back and talk about your story. I know you've been involved with the world of B2B data for a long time. Tell us a bit about what you were doing before Funnel Fuel.
Well, before Funnel Fuel was my first business venture, Encore. Before that was my 15, 16 years in B2B media. So I kind of come from a world more similar to yours, Joel, in the sense that I spent a lot of time working directly with B2B technology brands in the commercial team for a US publisher called IDG. That was my first exposure to this world of data. I was given a great opportunity to launch an ad network, and that was kind of the first version of the world we now live in, that data-driven world. So that gave me the opportunity to understand what could be done and what could be done better. And again, I'm hugely aware of the pressures of B2B media owners, publishers. It's impossible to do all things. You can't be an events company, media company, and a data-driven company and be great at all of them. And data was where my passion was. So I left IDG, now Foundry, to launch Encore. And Encore was a brilliant journey. We were the first in the market to truly talk about how data could help B2B marketers. We had some brilliant agency partners who recognized we could really add value to what they were doing. We were positioned in that brilliant moment where the programmatic world was growing, but B2B hadn't quite figured out where it fit. So we had a moment where we were using some brilliant partners to deliver great campaigns. We focused on trying to build bridges across the supply chain, but the frustration kept being that idea that at some stage, one of the partners that we were relying on would fail, it would break, or they would deprioritize our work because, again, it's back to this niche. You're the small guys just delivering the 10% of the revenue in a world that's driven by FMCG. So when I stepped away from Encore in 2020, if you'd have said to me I was going to be back in this sector, I'd have probably laughed at you and said that's the one thing I definitely won't do. But then we had a series of kind of interesting macro events. The C word happened, obviously globally, and that enforced me to take a slightly longer break than I'd imagined. And from there, it just became an opportunity as I embarked on a couple of consultancy projects to recognise actually we could do something really different here. So yeah, Funnel Fuel was born out of my love of data, but my frustration that there still wasn't the tech innovation development happening in the B2B world to make that data promise a reality.
Because Funnel Fuel is a relatively new company, right? You're still a scale up, is that correct?
Yeah. 3 years. 3 years is kind of how we talk about ourselves. We did quite a lot of work behind the scenes, though. We came out of stealth mode with some pretty impressive momentum behind us. But that was part of validating that what I thought was possible. Somebody referred to what Funnel Fuel is the other day as a very unusual marriage. And I can kind of see what they mean. I kind of took umbrage at it at first, but it is a strange marriage because we've kind of got the ad tech heritage in Funnel Fuel. So the launch of Funnel Fuel was very largely driven by me using tech as a key part of a consultancy project and recognizing just how well this tech could be used for a specific B2B challenge. It gave me the opportunity to play with that technology in a far more real world environment than I ever had done before. And when you can see something work, after years of being promised things would work, Joel, we've all had the PowerPoint, we've all been promised it can do everything. This was my first experience of using a tech that truly delivered against that B2B niche need. So that was really the kind of acorn that grew Funnel Fuel. So we didn't come from a standing start. We had 11 years of tech engineering build behind that first part of our product. What I recognized was a lot of the challenges, and we touched on this a bit earlier, that people go away and build ad tech without speaking to the community that they're building it for. And I think I was almost on the verge of doing that, for I reined myself in and recognized, despite the amount of time I've spent in this market, I've never worked client side. So me deciding what client side marketers, agencies wanted felt a little bit strange. So I did something very different. I decided to do a lot of the work in stealth. I decided to engage with a lot of very senior, very smart client-side professionals to gauge if what I was doing was actually going to interest them enough to potentially part with some of those very hard-fought marketing advertising dollars. And actually, one of the biggest kind of pieces of advice I got was from somebody who now works with us. So Paul Collier, who's our CMO, has spent his entire career client-side. And he was in a not too dissimilar position from me during that kind of enforced COVID era. So we spent a bit of time talking in beer gardens, the appropriate distance apart for a maximum of 2 hours or whatever the relevant rule was at the time. And I was continually testing and challenging him and asking him whether he felt if what I was doing made sense. A lot of that, Joel, was really, really deep thinking. So Paul really wanted to understand, I need to understand this market from start to end. I want you to really go into exactly how it works, who the players are, and what's actually happening behind the scenes. I'll be honest, he had a bit of a moment. Then he had a, why don't people know about this moment? And then he had a, could you really deliver on this? If all the problems that you're saying, Dan, do exist around opacity, lack of being able to show accountability, both at a delivery and an impact level, if you can do that, Dan, then you're talking a language that I think will resonate. Little did I know, Joel, that he then went away and spent probably 2 months talking to you about bigger industry challenges. And come on, Joel, what do you think is going to happen next? Because I was talking about this whole issue of efficiency. How do we make things more transparent? How do we make ourselves more accountable? You've been talking about that at a very macro level across the whole marketing sector. So without knowing it, you kind of did a bit of a job for me and aligned Paul to recognizing that this was relevant. People did want to talk about it. And the advertising piece is not everything in marketing. But if we can get it right, we can make our B2B marketing clients' life so much easier and give them everything they need to prove success.
I've always thought that advertising was opaque. And I think I always thought it was kind of willfully so. So it's great seeing this really being addressed, and with a sense of mission behind it. So I think it's a great project, and I'm applauding what you guys are doing. Funnel Fuel started in 2023, and the company's been growing since then. How has your the offer and the kind of mission you set out to? How has the growth and what you've experienced since that growth aligned with expectations or any plan that you had?
I think it's really hard to plan any kind of startup scale up. You kind of you aim for the moon and you accept you're going to miss it by a country mile, but let's just see what we can do. Where I've seen the business really is clients have engaged with us. This isn't a conversation. It's a very difficult job because part of what we're doing is going in and essentially saying that the current way of B2B advertising is broken, that we can do better. It can be quite a negative start of a conversation with somebody that, the money you've been spending for the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years, you could have spent that better. We're trying to get this message right, which is it's getting better. And we still don't talk about ourselves in terms of being the answer, the silver bullet. What we're trying to do is just make everything slightly better. We're trying to make the accountability better, the performance better, the reporting better, the insight better. And I think where we've seen most success is around clients actually opening the door and saying, I would like to understand a bit more about this. I'm not going to just accept the fact that it's an awkward conversation for me. I'd rather have that awkward conversation now and go in proactively and say, however, this is what I've done. Again, the report, and I've got certain views around some of these reports that are coming out and naming and shaming brands for appearing next to content, because I'm not sure it's really doing the advertising world much good, that type of public shaming. But I do think it's leading a lot more marketers to kind of open the doors and say, I'd just like to learn a little bit more and I'd like to understand a little bit more. And when people understand that, despite the fact that a lot of our messaging, a lot of our talk is around being more transparent, being less opaque, the end result of everything we do is it delivers better outcomes. So it's kind of I know it's a negative conversation around things that may have happened, but the byproduct of that is if we do it well, it will work better and we can prove it.
I mean, I absolutely right. And I was at a conference yesterday from a major global martech vendor, and they're pitching their services in the current environment around. Actually, we're all under pressure right now. What we need to make sure everything we're doing is as efficient as possible, and this is how our platform is doing that. And there's no reason why your digital advertising shouldn't go through the same process of scrutiny now. Perhaps it hasn't done in the past, but when's the best time to start? It's probably now, right?
Yes. Oh, yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday, exactly. In absence of yesterday, today is probably better.
That will work, Joel. Yeah.
So, you've also, I mean, we touched on this earlier on, right? So you're building a company, you're also building technology, and are you describing yourself as an ad tech business? Are you a technology business, or are you not a technology business?
Joel, we are not an ad tech business. I'm really fierce about this one because I think there's so many companies who actually claim to be ad tech that aren't. That true ad tech is fairly scarce, to be honest. So there is actually a metric by which we could be defined as an ad tech business. We've got more engineering talent than we've got commercial. So we've got more engineers building than we have got people out there selling it. But that's just, it's much harder to build something than to sell it. And I firmly believe that, having done that for the last 3 years now in situ. So no, I don't like to think of it as an ad tech business because that implies we're building specific bits of ad tech that we're going to monetize in isolation. We are building a X, Y, and Z. That's not our model. Our model is we're building capabilities that enable us to do a better job, enable our clients to see that we're doing a better job, and to improve the efficiency and the transparency across that whole piece. So examples of products that we build, for example, are transparent account building lists. So think about ABM. I've always had this frustration with ABM. We receive a lot of ABM lists, and I'm certainly not going to name and shame. They're not ABM lists. They're exports from some CRM that isn't really appropriate. So, and again, if there's an agency intermediary involved, it's simply because the time it takes to get a really clean ABM list, the campaigners finished. So we are doing more and more work with clients around these kind of dynamic ABM lists where we can take seed data from them, build a bigger account list, and also start to pull on providers that they may already have contracts with to pull intent data in so we can activate. So again, we're not siloed. We're just trying to build tech that maybe connects 1, 2, or 3 different platforms that a client may have already signed up for, but is struggling to activate against, or is struggling to find really good outcome-based advertising against them. But yeah, we're not an ad tech business. We will not be releasing in the foreseeable future a funnel fuel product that is going to be in any way, shape, or form described as SaaS. Even our analytics product, Joel, we give that to clients as a kind of zero cost part of working with this. If we want to prove that what we do works, we've got a tool that shows them that. We're not going to charge them to prove that what we do works. That's part of our mantra, really.
Is there a simplistic way of describing yourself or a categorization that you do align with, or is it, or you not really think there's an area that quite ticks every box.
There aren't many pure play B2B advertising companies out there that are genuinely building tech in the way that we do. There are obviously repping businesses and there are companies that sit on top of other parts of the ecosystem. When people talk about our competitive set, I see most of the spend that clients are allocating to us coming from places like LinkedIn, because it kind of feels more like that type of approach that we bring. But I don't see any kind of direct competitors. There are genuine ad tech companies out there that are building great ad tech in the B2B space. There is finally some innovation in this space, but it tends to address just one very focused area rather than this whole bigger issue of B2B advertising.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. It's often hard to fit a square peg into a round hole and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So the digital advertising world is one that evolves fast, and Google's kept us on tenterhooks for a long time about the future of cookies. So what's the status of this problem you're trying to address right now? Is there any chance the industry will kind of self-correct and deal with it by itself?
I doubt it. Based on my experience, I haven't seen any genuine industry attempt to make ourselves better as an entire collective. There are loads of great companies in this sector. So I'm mindful, I don't want to call out the sector, but everything that seems to be happening is actually going in the opposite direction. And again, I'm going to reference the B2C world, but I find these kind of approaches by the big platforms of give us your money, give us your objectives, go away, and we're not going to tell you anything as particularly frightening. And I don't believe B2B marketers will go down that particular path. I think we're in an era now, and the Google hokey cokey around cookies frustrated everybody. And I've got lots of sympathy for every single person who operates in this sector, because everybody invested time, resource, energy in trying to figure out what to do. We all played the game, understanding how big Google is in this ecosystem. It's their playground. We've got to kind of understand what rules they're putting in place. But the impact of those decisions on smaller businesses is actually quite material. And if we didn't have such an agile organization, we could have spent a significant amount of time exploring opportunities that Google then simply pulled the rug from. So I think I view that as part of our job in this ecosystem is to stop the over-dependency on anybody else. The more we can't move away from Google. We can't. You look at how it's lots of data at the moment about Google's search dominance is on the wane. Google is a dominant player in this ecosystem, even the B2B advertising space, because a lot of traffic is generated via the Google platforms. A lot of eyeballs are generated because Google have put them there. We can't ignore them, but let's at least try and not give them all the control. And that's why when we talk about analytics and things like that, we are a million miles away from relying on a Google cookie or anything else to deliver insight for clients, because that whole 18-month, 2-year window that's just passed has shown you can't trust them to be consistent in what they're going to do.
I mean, you could argue it's a case in point about why they're just, without assuming no malice, right? There's just not enough vested interest for them to sort it out. It's too complicated to sort it out, and they'd rather they don't want to destroy the status quo. So, or you could say kill the goose and lay the golden egg, but that's maybe a bit too cynical. It's just not worth them trying to address it. So hence they've just fudged it.
They have fudged it. And again, we talk about how the advertising community, the people who are actually paying the dollars for these ad placements, are never involved in the conversation, because I don't believe there's any marketer out there who said to Meta or to Google, please, can you be more opaque? Tell me less, please. That would be good. I just don't believe that. However, they're now stuck with a platform that's enforcing rules and know they've got to keep the spend. But B2B marketers, to a point, are going to need to continue to invest in things like Google, particularly on the search front. Don't rely on them for tracking or supporting your B2B objectives. They will let you down.
Okay, so given your background, I know that data is something you're very passionate about, you've got a lot of experience about. To what extent is data at the core of this problem? Is this finally an opportunity for B2B marketers to get their data houses in order and focus on quality rather than quantity?
I really hope so. Again, it's, as I said, there is too much data. There is actually too much data, and that's simply because there is no real restriction on the data in this ecosystem. The checks and balances, and there's no auditing of data. So we can claim data represents anything to a point. So it is a part of the problem, this whole data world. I think the more interesting piece is what you just said there, Joel, around client data. Because I think suddenly there's a realization from a client's perspective that that first party data piece is hugely important. There's a move towards what we're talking about as kind of this data sovereignty piece, which is do not allow your data in any way, shape or form to be taken out of your organization, either to support and this has happened, the advertising marketing goals of a competitor, or to just support the overall corporate goals of the supplier. Your data is sacrosanct, and the fact that it would be great for any supplier to be able to see that first party data does not mean people should be giving it away. There's a load of concern around not just legislative concerns around this, but actually commercial, like what's happening to my data and what is it being used for that I'm unaware of. And there's a couple of really interesting people on LinkedIn having a very vocal conversation around this right now, and Part of the challenge is the trust piece. And part of the reason trust is broken is very few of these contracts actually give clients true control and ownership over their first party data. So if we're going to talk about trust, I would suggest every marketer looks at those analytics contracts, those supplier contracts, and make sure that their first party data is exactly that. It's sacrosanct and it remains first party data actionable only for you as a marketer. It's your data. You've invested heavily to make it valuable and use it accordingly.
Yeah, it feels like, again, back to it feels like it's such a fundamental asset, but at the same time we're talking again about efficiency. If your data, the better your data is, the more effective your marketing is going to be, and pushing it under the carpet doesn't seem like an option very much anymore.
No.
So drawing to a close, clearly Funnel Fuel's achieved an awful lot in terms of its mission, in terms of what it's trying to do, and what it's building its services and products. What's next, and where are you going to focus your attention? How are you going to focus your attention to help continue to address these issues?
I think the what next, I always think of it in two different ways. I do geek out a little bit about this omni-channel world, simply because I just think from a B2B marketer's perspective, that ability to lean on channels that were not there before is exciting. Now, I also get excited because we've already witnessed that if you take B2B advertising into a channel where traditionally there hasn't been much B2B advertising, the performance standout is incredible. Now, don't know how long that will last for, but right now there's an opportunity to create great standout. I'm not talking about negative standout. It's still got to be aligned to the right people. It's got to be in an environment that we as B2B marketers are comfortable with, but that really excites me. It's just going to get more and more exciting. The other one for us, of course, is, we're a London-based scale-up. We haven't done anything meaningful outside of London in terms of our feet on ground. Most of our clients work with us, certainly on a regional, if not a global basis, but we haven't explored actually going into other markets and planting a Funnel Fuel flag and trying to understand if we can do the same thing in other markets. We've just launched into Singapore and we're about to launch into the US. I think that international piece generally is considered incredibly challenging for a London startup. I love the fact that we've made data so complicated here, though. Like, we're in a great place. We came from the GDPR world, then we went through the Brexit moment, so we're now kind of hamstrung by European and UK legislation. We've got a very good, on the whole, I think, industry regulator in the ICO who are doing as much as they can do. They're not quite being as draconian as some of our European counterparts, but we've been kept on our toes from a data perspective. So when we speak to American counterparts who themselves are going through a lot of changes, they see us as almost the people who survived the war and come out with a product, a solution that will work. It's kind of, you guys have already been kicked, beaten, and interrogated. Are you compliant? Yes, that works in an American market. So I'm excited about that and what that could do.
And it feels like, as I said, the nature of the problem isn't going away, and you've got, you're fueled, pardon the pun, by an opportunity, but also a necessity in terms of that there's an inequity going on here, right? This is something which B2B marketers need to resolve for the good of the profession and for the good of the brands they're working for.
I'd absolutely agree with that. And as I said, I do recognise at the moment a lot of the chatter in the industry is around the problems. The good thing is we're making such great steps forward as an industry. It's not just the Funnel Fuel. There are other brands out there. You referenced the conference you were at yesterday. There's some really good work being done to kind of, I'd argue, not just play catch up, but I still remain confident that if we're talking again, Joel, in 2, maybe 3 years, B2B advertising will be in a better place than B2C advertising. And our counterparts in the B2C world will be looking enviously at our more transparent, less opaque way of doing things.
That's a great aspiration to have, and I think it's about time that this aspect of B2B kind of continued on the kind of development other areas have. So, a last question to you: there are undoubtedly marketers listening to this who weren't really aware of this problem with advertising efficiency. This is a complete curveball for them. This is the first time they've heard any of this. And possibly they were partly aware of it. They kind of buried their heads in the sand because it was a big problem. They didn't want to address it. What one simple thing should they do right now to start on their journey to addressing it?
It's probably an answer you get a lot. Ask questions of your current suppliers and go out into the market and ask questions. And I think, just to give the B2B Ignite conference a bit of a plug, but I did notice last year, and it was the first event that Funnel Fuel had ever actually attended in any real meaning. I found it really refreshing that people were asking questions. And that horrible moment of, I think this is a stupid question, but I really would suggest people stop saying that, because there are no stupid questions in this ecosystem, even down to, great question I had before I walked in here, what exactly is a cookie down? And I thought it's great because sometimes we kind of default to not being prepared to answer those questions or ask the questions. So ask as many questions as you can. and ask one more question when you think you've answered the final question you should ask.
And the starting point is, how efficient is my advertising, right? How can you prove how efficient my advertising is? That kind of thing, right? It's as simple as that.
It's the things that I kind of worry that we're still having to ask. And again, can you tell me what my advertising dollar has been spent on, where it has been spent, and what results it's delivered for me, please? And that's really, really simple and weirdly, people are not asking those questions. People do not know exactly where the ad spend is going. They certainly don't know where it's going. And I would suggest that very few people truly know the impact it's having. You should be able to answer those within one phone call.
Those should be fundamental questions, shouldn't they?
It's kind of scary that they're not.
Yeah, it is absolutely. It speaks to the challenge that we're facing here. So, Dan, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for your time today. Congratulations on the success you've had so far.
Thanks, Jill. Really appreciate that. And likewise, great to catch up.
Great stuff. Well, I hope you. Thanks to Dan for his time today. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please review it if you enjoyed it. Remember to like and subscribe. It's a great way of listening to know that you're listening and enjoying what we're doing. There's a lot more content on this subject come up in the future. In the meantime, today, thanks very much for listening, and hope you can join us again soon.